and what is he suffering from?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's horrific to watch, and as a trauma surgeon, trauma neurosurgeon myself, sometimes we'll see patients who are brought in, but we never really see this part of things. I was keeping very close track of things, both in terms of what was happening, but also the timing of things. And he was sort of dragged over to this car in handcuffs and laid up against the car. That happened around 8:33, according to the clock. It was about 8 minutes later that you first saw a fire truck pull up. But nothing really happens at that point. That's what's sort of stunning. I guess that's what you and Shimon are both sort of alluding to. 8:55, so 15 minutes later, roughly, is when the first time he seems to be assessed. Someone actually has a bag and is trying to assess him, but it's not till 9 o'clock. I don't know if we've seen this in this video yet. I watched some of it earlier, when you finally see people starting to actually administer some sort of care. So it's about a half an hour. And, when you watch this, there's all sorts of different injuries he may have suffered. I mean, so many of the injuries to the head. I mean, you saw kicks to the head. You saw these blows to the head, punches to the head.
Lady D, I listened to you on
very concerning.
WDIA,
what can happen in that situation
Memphis Finest.
Is that
Is this what you're talking about, Memphis
may
Finest?
start to swell. And that's why this timing is so critical, because if the brain is swelling, he still seemed like he was talking at some point, but he's obviously getting worse. The brain starts to swell, then you're not getting enough oxygenated blood to the brain anymore, and that's what causes the big problem and what can lead to death ultimately. Don't know. All we've been told from the pathologist so far and from Benjamin Crump's office was that he had significant bleeding associated with the beating. We know that. We can see that. My concern is that so much of that happened inside his skull, Don, and I mean, it was just really,
Sanjay,
really hard to watch.
So he should have been taken to a hospital immediately. Am I wrong?
No, absolutely. I mean, I count at least a half an hour probably, and that's after the fire truck.
All this was just unnecessary, just a bunch of thugs.
So he should have absolutely been taken. Shimon made the point. Do we know that would have made a difference? Can't say that, but yeah, I mean, he's just laying there, obviously in critical condition at this point.
But there was a discussion with you can hear on the transmissions about whether or not to bring him back to this scene. What I can't figure out, and I've been sort of still, this is something that has, I don't know, the fact that the EMTs did not take him, the fact that we had heard about this earlier has sort of stayed with me. And when you watch this, it's hard to believe that none of them, they would offer him any kind of aid at this point. And you see he's handcuffed at this point, and he's seemingly unconscious. He's falling in different directions, but
I think he's going in and out of consciousness, because there's a point where he's laying and he falls over, and obviously he's out of it, and then they try to.
But no one's helping him.
That happens.
No one.
Sanjay, in this situation, right? He can go, come to, and then go back out again.
There's a phenomenon, and I hesitate to even say it because it's hard to think about, but it's basically talk and die, where you're still talking, but because of that brain swelling that's occurring, you are sort of lapsing in and out of consciousness, but the trajectory is that the brain will just continue to swell, and that's the real problem, and that's why timing is so critical. I mean, you have to render care, but he needed to be going to a hospital as quickly as possible, and the EMS vehicle, as far as I can tell, is there. And that's what's so it's anxiety provoking to watch that.
Yeah. Well, Sanjay, thank you, Shimon. Stand by. I'm going to toss it back to my colleagues in New York, but you're watching the video being released by the Memphis Police Department at this point. Aaron.
Don, it is amazing as we watch this together. You're in Memphis, I'm here, we're watching this, and we are still watching. Everyone should understand this is still the actual video released by the city of Memphis. So as we're watching here, this isn't a replay, this isn't a let's just show how long it took them. This is still happening. He is still lying there. We understand there's another 6 or 7 minutes more to go before this Skycam video ends. So all this time is happening as they're milling around, and as Sanjay was just telling Don, in critical condition, you have someone lying on the ground there, and they're doing nothing. As our coverage continues here, this is a special edition of Anderson Cooper 360, and I'm Erin Burnett, along with my colleague Don Lemon, who has been on the ground covering this story tirelessly from Memphis. All of our reporters and our experts are standing by. Van Jones is also with us. And Van, as we watch this, I want to emphasize again, we are not replaying it. This is not a clip. This is still happening. Nothing has happened. The beating now is more than 12 or more minutes ago, and he's just still lying on the ground.
Brutal, inhumane, unacceptable, unjustifiable. I mean, he's just now getting attention. A dog being beaten would have gotten some help from somebody by this point. And also, you know, we talk about the images. The voices are so telling. Tyree's voice, the first time you hear him, he's calm. He's trying to calm the police down. He's saying, all right, all right, all right. He goes from a voice of reason and calm. And they are so brutal toward him that he runs. The next time you hear him, he's gone from calm to panic. Ma, 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 screaming for his mother. He's 100 yards from his house, hoping that somebody can help him. And then he goes from a voice of calm to panic to agony, completely incoherent, unable to form a word. You watch this deterioration of a human being. If you couldn't see it, you could hear it. You could hear it. And then the cops' voices, profane, I hope they stomp his ass, unbelievable level of viciousness. And then the only sympathy is for themselves because they're so busy pepper spraying him, they're pepper spraying each other. Look at the reaction of the police to the pepper spray on themselves. They can't stand the burning, the sensation, the capsaicin in their eyes. They need help from each other, and yet still the beating is continuing for someone else and no aid to someone else who got the full force of the pepper spray. And so even if you didn't see these images, just the voice of Tyree, you can tell he was the only calm person at the beginning. And at the end, he can't even form a word. This is disgusting. It's despicable. It is inhumane. It is shocking. It's as bad as people said, but even if you couldn't see it, you could hear the inhumanity here.
John Miller, one thing that I think was so powerful as Van's words, as profound as they are, is the fact that there was no audio. And we heard the screaming on the police body cam, but the part where we could see it didn't have audio. And for me, that actually was more powerful, to be forced to watch something without the audio when I knew what was happening.
Well, oftentimes it's the view that allows you to stand back from the incident and not be in the middle of it and remove all the distractions of the sounds where you can see it most clearly. And that's what we just experienced when you saw that first baton strike, followed by the 2 or 3 head kicks, followed by the head punches that were going on.
Yeah, they kicked his ass good. They beat him. They murdered him.
You see what
Just
happens
like a
when it
gang
goes from
thuggers.
this pitch brutality
Very embarrassing.
to slow motion.
I know
where
when
he's
I crossed
lying
that
there.
bridge going to Memphis, I'll never
There's
forget
a
this.
Fire department unit gets
Won't
there,
be
an
going across that
ambulance
bridge
team,
too soon
and they're
either.
standing there, and they engage with a brief conversation.
this what they
That
call
medical bag
policemen.
is sitting on the ground, and they're still standing there, and
And they
an
offered the
enormous
man no
amount of
help yet.
time is going by
Never
without
seen nothing. This is
stretcher
disgusting.
coming out, without him being put in an ambulance, without vital signs being taken, without injuries being treated. And as Sanjay told us, you know, we've seen multiple instances of blunt head trauma where his brain is starting to swell, a concussion is turning into something worse. And the 2 medical professionals are kind of standing around waiting
They
for
need to take their
it's
license
not
from them
clear
and fire
what.
them too.
And Darren, this is what is shot 9 times in under 4 minutes. We understand from watching this is how many times he was struck. And yet what you are struck by watching this is a complete and utter lack of urgency by anybody. Seems like there's paperwork coming out. I mean, that there's absolutely no care for the fact that there's a human being sitting there.
Absolutely. You have to take in consideration police officers are public servants. the public is not being served appropriately in this case. But I want to go back to another point that you mentioned earlier, Aaron, in connection with the view that we have, the silent view. The poll camera gives us an unobstructed view, whereas when we look at the body cam video from the officers, it's somewhat juxtaposed, it's bouncing all over the place, so we don't have the ability to gain a clear and concise angle. Whereas the poll camera gives us a far more comprehensive perspective as to what's happening. Therefore, we can frame this accordingly. And then when we speak to the testament of a person that's in need of care, you as a police officer, it's commonplace for an officer to shoot someone and then turn around and do CPR on that same person that they shot. But we look at this situation, we have officers that are clearly embarking upon a campaign of brutality, and no one is doing anything to help him. And so it goes back to the failure to act, the failure to care, and the overall obliviousness of the officers that are just standing around when we clearly had someone that should have been taken into custody and removed from the scene.
Finally, you see a stretcher. Okay, this is still the video playing out. Everyone should know it has not finished. We are not replaying it. This is still playing out. Finally, a stretcher has come. And Joey, as we're talking about this, when you watch it, you feel as if it's sort of everybody just ganging up on somebody.
You do. And I think, Aaron, that is part and parcel for why the prosecutor is charging it and acting in concert. Remember, there is no distinction from a prosecution perspective with regard to what they're being charged with. And if you look at the charges and you look at their conduct, I think you can match it pretty clearly and make the case in front of a jury. There are people who are asking, hey, is it murder one? Is it murder two? Well, what's the difference? The prosecutor in murder one, Aaron, does not have to prove that it's a premeditated killing, but instead have to prove under murder two that it's a knowing killing. What does that mean? It means you're reckless. It means that you have to know and appreciate that as a result of that conduct, that a death could result. And you cannot tell me if you're punching someone indiscriminately and repeatedly in the face, if you're kicking someone in the face and about their body, if you're using a baton to strike them multiple times, that you can't appreciate that this would happen. What more so, Aaron? Look at the weight differential. We've heard the reports with respect to Mr. Nichols and him weighing 140 pounds and being 6'3". Well, look for our own eyes at how big these officers are. And that certainly is going to play into the prosecution here. Just really hard to watch.
Incredibly hard to watch. And of course, 5 of them charged with second degree. And a lot of others, 9 or 10 we've counted come in and out. We don't yet have charges for. We don't know where that will go, Don. As we're watching this, again, finally an ambulance pulling up here, Don, as we're all watching. This is still all playing out. Yeah. All of them standing around, the ambulance now pulling up.
And I'm wondering about the training of these officers and exactly what's the reason. John Miller, can you answer this question? What's the reason for these poll cameras? Who's watching these poll cameras? If you have an incident, obviously that's ongoing, and someone can see it somewhere. What's the reason? Is someone watching these cameras? Why wouldn't they send help? Why wouldn't they get on the horn and say something is wrong here? What's going on?
So generally, someone isn't watching these poll cameras. Generally, the poll cameras are there to record things in areas where they're having crimes. And then once you have the report of the crime, you can rewind the camera and say, do we see a suspect? Do we have the actual crime? And so on. That's the primary purpose. What's interesting about the poll cameras, and we'll have to go back over this later, is at the beginning of it, you see it's far away, then you see it pans over and zooms in. We're going to have to figure out, was someone on the pan, tilt, zoom other end of that camera?
Why did it zoom?
Or is it a thing where they located the camera, the incident's in the background, and they blew it up to make it clearer? That's something we'll have to get to the bottom of. But I think when you look at some of the things that Lieutenant Porcher has said and some of the questions that raise here, you come back to the same 3 places. It's a highly specialized unit. What was the selection process for these officers? Because you're supposed to be getting the best of the best. What was the added training beyond their normal police training, because they're going to be involved in crimes in progress and armed people? And then the thing we keep coming back to, which is, this is something Chief C.J. Davis has talked about, span of control. Span of control in normal life is 1 sergeant to 8 or 10 cops, and you're supervising your team. Span of control for high-end plainclothes operations targeting violent crime and guns, That should be 1 to 3, 1 to 4, tops 1 to 5. And here we have 5 police officers, then 8, and no supervisor on the scene. What would the difference be? The difference would be not that you would have a ranking person to supervise an act of police brutality. The difference would be you would have the level of supervision and experience for someone to very early on say, okay, what do you got? That translates to, how did this start? What's it about? Well, it was traffic, sir. Okay, so this is traffic only? We're not chasing a stick-up man. We don't have a pound of narcotics. We don't have a gun in the car. So let's wind this thing down. Let's wind this thing down now. None of that occurs. This is an incident that is entirely self-propelling, and that's a problem, and one that the chief recognized. She said, I have a span of control problem. We don't have enough supervisors.